Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we're bringing in Segun Adebayo. Thank you so much for joining us. How you doing today?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jason. I'm doing pretty good. It's such a huge privilege to be here to showcase something I've done. So I'm definitely thankful for that opportunity. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. I am absolutely thrilled to have you on. I know that we've been trying to connect for a while, so this is very exciting. Yeah, we had a little bit of an issue with the embed. That's definitely not going to make it to the cut, y'all. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you have no idea what I'm talking about right now. So, Shugun, for folks who aren't familiar with your work, do you want to give us? I mean, you've done a ton in this community, so could you maybe just give us a quick rundown of who you are, what you're about?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Segun Adebayo. I prefer people call me Sage sometimes because I'm a huge anime fan. So I love anime a lot. I watch lots of anime. I am the creator of Chakra UI and Zag. Chakra UI is a React component library that gives you all the building blocks you need to build an accessible app really fast. And quite recently, I launched another library, Zag.js, which is like an offshoot from Chakra UI and the experience and learnings. So basically, Zag.js is a UI component library. Sometimes I'll probably not call it a UI component library, but it's a set of UI component libraries that are powered by state machines and state charts, right? So that's about Chakra UI and Zag. I'm based in Dubai. I work at Vercel. Huge privilege to be working with huge, talented folks at Vercel in there. And very recently, I've been thinking about and really been passionate about building tools that help bridge the gap between design and code. So that's a brief about me.
Yeah, I mean it's you're in good company with the bridging the gap between design and code because it feels like there's so much interesting innovation happening in this space with the work that we're seeing from Figma just dropped a bunch of new things today. The work you're doing with component libraries like Zag is really interesting. We just had an episode where we have an episode coming up where we're gonna look at like importing code directly into Figma from the backlight team. So there's just some really interesting stuff coming out of this space right now that I'm so excited about. So what got you into this? Like where did you start your journey that led you to create something like Zag?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey coming so far. So launching Chakra UI in September 2019 was one of that's where I call like the prime time of this journey. Maintaining Chakra UI for the past 3 years, trying to keep it all vibrant and active, fixing bugs, adding features, adding new components, and then people request, can you add a date picker to that? Can you add a date range picker to that? Can you add like more complex components like a carousel? And then I got to the point where I felt like managing the complexities within Chakra UI got pretty huge. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like people want different components, different props, different ways to configure the components to match their own use case.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I just thought about it very deeply. And at the time, we also had Chakra UI View, which was basically a view port of Chakra UI React. And then one of the things I started to see from the work that Jonathan, the creator of Chakra UI View, did was basically a copy paste from React, which like you see the hooks in React, you just like copy it over to Vue, change it to Vue specific terminologies like refs, watch effect, and it just works basically. And then you fix a few bugs. And I've seen them do this over the past like 8 months, trying to sort of
Mm-hmm.
like copy over from React, paste it into Vue, and just change some things and make it work. And it sort of struck me that we might literally be spreading ourselves out too thin here, because for every single bug we fix in React, there's a high chance that the same bug exists in Vue. And like trying to keep up with that communication to say, hey, Vue guys, I just fixed this bug. Can you guys check that the bug is fixed? And then they go, oh yes, gotcha, it's fixed now. And then we move very fast within the React team. So it's like it was pretty hard and tedious to keep up with the pace of fixing bugs from one framework and transferring that over to the next framework. So
Mm-hmm.
that got me thinking about like how could we potentially build like this like framework agnostic warehouse of component logic and just share this across Chakra UI React and Chakra UI Vue. So
Mm-hmm.
this is where the journey started. Interestingly, so in there I took a deep dive into state machines, state charts. Huge props to David Koshid. Just like learning and reading all this stuff was actually helped me like open my mind to see the possibilities in there. That's how
Absolutely.
Zach started.
Very cool. Yeah. And David, I think, is in the chat today. And so we've had David on the show a couple times. So for folks who are interested in kind of a crash course in state machines, we've got a couple back episodes of Learn with Jason you can go and watch. Those will be in the show notes if you want to watch them. So when you're talking about state machines, you mentioned like there's complicated UI. It's hard to share these bugs in. And what I've heard when people start looking at state machines is that they feel like it adds a lot of extra code. Like a lot of, when you look at a state machine, it feels like it's very complex. What has your experience been? Like, do you feel like you're writing more code to manage Zag with state machines? Do you feel like it's prevented you from writing additional code? Like, how have you found the experience of maintaining a component library powered by state machines?
Yeah, it's been a fun experience. I think, I mean, so far I've been working on Zag for the past 10 months now. And I think that's like, I mean, it's been so much easier compared to like maintaining React because there are a couple
Mm-hmm.
of like issues with trying to build a custom hook for a component in React.
Mm-hmm.
So one of these issues could be like, when I just take a look at this hook code, let's just give it a name called use select, right? So if I
Right.
take a look at this hook called use select, how do I understand like how the events and transitions happen within this hook? So you're going to see a bunch of use states, use effect, use callback, use memo, sometimes use context. And then the question is like, how do I wrap my mind around how this component works, basically? And if you tell me there's a bug in this use select hook, where do I look exactly to fix it? So you then become like a console.log warrior and just be like console.log here. Let me see if it works. Console.log here, and then you get to the point and you just try to fix it and it's done. But then that just feels to me like you're basically just like plumbing through your code, just trying to like find where the holes are in this pipe and just like duct tape that hole there and just like we're done and we move on from there. So I mean, I found that like it's a whole lot easier to think about, to reason about like how a component works
Mm-hmm.
and the transitions, the states this component would have, the transitions between them. So usually when there's a bug, I find that I'm asking myself much more like quality questions. It's not
Mm-hmm.
exactly like, is this caused by use effect or like, I mean, now it's React 18, is this a double render issue where I have to maybe like check, maybe it's like some strict mode issue there and there. But I find myself asking questions like, what state and what transition caused this issue, and like how do I can easily narrow down where the bug is and just fix it instantly. And I think the joy of this is the fact that once you do this, it's basically like solved for almost like every framework out there because it's just like a
Mm.
piece of logic that powers that component.
That's something that has kind of stuck with me about state machines is this idea that this isn't new technology. This isn't framework specific technology. This is something that's been around for a long time. The idea of describing state with state charts, and the kind of the goal behind finite state machines. This is established practice from what, like the 70s or something. Like, it's been around for a long time. So if
Yeah.
you can write this in any programming language, the logic stays intact across any framework, and that to me is really exciting because, like you mentioned, the portability of things, it's very easy to write code as if it will live forever and you'll never have to maintain it or port it or anything. But if any of us who have been in the game for longer than a couple of years, we've all had to port from, jQuery to Backbone to React or to Angular or whatever it was that
Yeah.
we were working on, right? And it's probably likely that within the next 5 years we'll all be doing it again, from React to whatever the next thing is, or from, if we're not using Next or Remix or whatever the React framework is, we'll be porting to the next React framework. Like, there's always something that's going to change, and knowing that your application logic is solid and transportable is really, really exciting. The other thing that I love about it is this idea that the point of a state machine is it draws all of the complexity of UI into view as opposed to letting it be hidden. Like you said, if you're not paying attention to this, you've got leaky pipes, you have to go duct tape something, you're trying to figure out where it is and you write like a special handler case and that's all on you. Whereas with a state machine, you explicitly define what's possible the only way that you would need to fix that is if a new state becomes possible, right? And so
Hmm.
where do you like as you've been building out Zag, what are the components where you've seen the most surprising amount of complexity as you've built them out?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'd say like I'll pick two of the machines. I think one of them is the menu machine,
Mm.
specifically when you have a menu that supports nested menus.
Oh yeah.
Basically, so this is one of the possibilities within Zag. We struggled a lot last year when we attempted to do this in classic React, and there's so many hacks in the code. And I got super embarrassed to the point where I just like deprecated that. Like, no, I don't think we can ship this. I mean, it works. I mean, it looks pretty stable. The tests are passing, but I don't feel confident in this code. And if anyone opens an issue with this component, I most likely start to cringe and just feel bad because like I don't even know where to look. It's so I mean, it's such a huge mess. And I mean, what I'm trying to do now with state machines is to actually be very careful with how these machines are modeled. So it's like very predictable. You know what's gonna happen. You know where,
Mm.
what state, what transition, what event caused this bug to happen, and you can easily narrow that down and fix it. Right. So that's like one of the things. So menu and adding sub menu, nested menu support was quite a challenge because
Hmm.
trying to get that interaction to work because you have one menu and then you have another menu. Each menu is its own piece of logic, but then you need to figure out like how do you interconnect them together, and sort of make them linked. That's like the huge challenge there. And these ideas were, I mean, they were pretty complex initially, but I think I'm starting to get a hang of that right now and sort of understanding the real premise behind state machines to build complex logic
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah, I find that to be, and it's also interesting when you start thinking about even the really simple stuff like a text input. There's logic that you just kind of take for granted, right? Like there's the inactive state, the disabled state, the selected state, or the selected or focused. And in each of those states, things should and shouldn't be possible, like whether or not you can put text into the input. But
Hmm.
because if you're not using something like a state machine which explicitly enables or disables that feature, you have to just assume that no one would ever try to update the content of an input without having selected it first and just
Yeah.
hope for the best, right? And that, to me, that's such a wild way to look at it, because you'd think, oh, it's an input, like inputs are whatever, just leave them alone, right? But there's every bit of UI is complex. I think there was a slide that at Reactathon where somebody was showing the number of implicit states that exist with like even relatively simple components, and it's just it's factorial levels of complexity where it's like, oh, tens
Hmm.
of thousands of ways that this could potentially fit together, unless you get really descriptive about this state allows these two things. If it's not in this state, it can't do those things, and if you try to do those things, it'll break. Right? And now you've been explicit, and so your components do exactly what you expected. So what how many components have you been able to put into Zag so far?
Yeah, I think so far we have close to 12 components. I think it's probably 15 if I'm not mistaken. But then just a few of them are documented. Maybe like 10 of them are currently documented live in the docs, for reasons that's like sometimes you make the thing and then to document the thing becomes like a huge task. It's just like I want to be able to show people enough use cases and examples for these components. So there's a high chance that all 15 would go live within the next month or so.
Nice, nice, very cool. And I'm seeing in the chat that Michael Chan was the speaker who talked about all the implicit states. Michael has also been
Oh,
on the show,
awesome.
so I'll drop a link to his talk there for anybody who wants to see more from Michael. He's brilliant. You should watch that. So
Awesome.
at this point, I mean, okay, I feel like I could ask you about a million questions here, but it might be more fun if we can just take a look at the code and show how it all fits together. So let me switch us into our pair programming mode. There
Okay.
we go. All right. And now let me get this off the screen so that we don't get the screen inception there. And let's start by talking about our captioning. So quick break here. We've got Ashley with us from White Coat Captioning, taking down everything we're saying today. Thank you very much, Ashley. And that's made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, NX, and Backlight, all kicking in to make this show more accessible to more people. And we are talking to Sage. So if you want to follow Sage, head over to Twitter and click the follow button. Smash that follow button, ring that bell, all those are good things. And let's see, we talked about, there's Michael Chan, there's that smart fella, and then we've got David Khorshid, who's with us in the chat today, talking about state machines, and we are looking at Zag.js, which is right here. And that is about as much as I know about Zag. So, Segun, what should I do first if we want to start building a project?
Sure. I mean, I would say maybe you just take a look at the homepage. Let's scroll down a bit to actually like get like if it's a fresh idea of what Zag is. And then one of the key premise of Zag is that the machines handle the logic for you. It's powered by state charts. One of the key things we try to do is to try to bake in accessibility as much as possible. So this is basically like a sum of all my experience building Chakra UI,
Mm-hmm.
my heart and soul going into like figuring out like even though these are state machines, how do I make sure that people actually build accessible experiences using these machines, right? And that brings us to an interesting topic. But overall, I mean, we try to keep it as framework agnostic as possible and then provide adapters for different frameworks. So
Mm-hmm.
you can scroll down a little bit and we see like there's an interesting example of the different frameworks down there. If you go one more, so right here, you see an example of what Zag looks like for three key frameworks: React, Vue, JSX syntax for now, and Solid.js. So these are the three frameworks where we battle tested Zag to make sure it actually works pretty well. And so far, we're pretty proud of its outcome. Right. So this is
Oh,
basically a quick
wow.
setup of Zag and how simple it is to work with.
Yeah. And this is great, right? So we've got the number input, we've got a use machine and use setup. We set it up to have the state and a send, which is a state machine kind of like send an action.
Yep.
Then we set up a ref for our container.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So typically, what that ref is, from my experience working in Chakra UI, people will build components. Basically, we have to like take into consideration the fact that these components should be able to work within an iframe or
Okay.
within a custom window environment. Basically, right. So this use setup hook does two things. One of them is to help you provide a unique ID for that component. Which every component on the page needs to have like some unique ID, and then the second one is to provide the correct reference to the owner document, right? So owner
Mm-hmm.
document is basically a reference to the correct document. So if you do things like document.query selector or document.get element by ID, those things, if you're within an iframe or within a custom window environment like an Electron app, for example, the reference to document needs to actually it's not the same as the global document that we're used to. So that use setup hook takes care of all those nuances, basically.
Very cool. Okay. And then if we look at like the actual implementation here too, in React, right? We're just using plain old HTML and spreading out our API to decrement, increment, and then our input props. Okay, all good. And then we go to view, and it's the same thing. So we're using machine, state, and send. We get our ref, and then we come down here and we've got our ref. We spread out the decrement and the increment in our input, and it's just plain old HTML. All right, so let's go look at solid. Okay, number input, normalize props, use machine, use setup. All makes sense. Here's use machine. And we end up down here again with plain old HTML, decrement, increment. So this is really powerful because with the exception of this little bit of extra logic around the API, which is it looks
Mm,
different in solid. Vue has a little bit of a computed thing, and then the API in React uses this dot connect. But this is, or they all connect, but they have helpers. It
yeah.
looks like so. I mean, this is incredible. Like what I was honestly expecting, and this is just me coming in with no context. I thought what we were going to see is similar to what you would get in something like Chakra or other libraries, where you have like import number input from Zag.js/React, and that's the whole thing. I didn't expect that it was going to give you this
Oh, I
logic like prepackaged,
see.
right? So this is great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think one of the key premise here is we want to help people, like we want to actually provide headless components. So the idea or the premise behind headless components is you provide the logic and you provide like all of the like event handlers and properties, and then you just let the user like take control of the UI, style it however they want to actually do. Because I think this provides a lot more value I mean, to people that are actually developing apps and softwares compared to if you gave them a pre-packaged component library. And I think the way we build Zag would like for it to be like the heart and soul of most component libraries out there. So it's basically
Mm.
like one level lower than Chakra UI, but basically to help provide the same set of logic and standards across all frameworks, basically.
So this is interesting because you're not actually saying like go out and as a typical consumer use this to build your consumer UIs. You're almost saying, hey, component library builders, use Zag to build your component libraries, and that way you get all this cross-functional support more or less baked in.
Yes, exactly. Well, I would say like both. I mean, I think this serves right for both component libraries and even for application builders. I mean, if you wanted in your app to have this number input component, you don't have to go install some component library because there's a high chance that you have a design in
Mm-hmm.
mind. You just need the logic for this thing, so you can basically just grab the logic and just design it to match your taste, and that's it.
Yeah. No, this is cool. So this ties into there's a concept that I've heard talked about a lot. I think the Nielsen Norman Group was behind it originally, but it's this idea of progressive disclosure, and I talk about it as the progressive disclosure of complexity when you're talking about apps, where
Hmm.
what I want as a developer is to do as little coding as possible until I need to do something custom. Like I want no boilerplate. I don't want to have to write a bunch of stuff, copy paste a bunch of stuff, deal with writing code that isn't really unique to my app. I want everything to sit as like a there's your app. This is one of the reasons that I love services like Netlify and Vercel, right? We take away this whole layer of complexity about getting things online or serving and hosting. So when it comes to the UI, I want the same thing. Here's my UI. Oh, I have custom logic. Great. Let me break out just to the layer that I need to modify. And with you providing this complex like all of this logic bundled up here, and then I just get to write the HTML and CSS, I get that. I don't have to write a bunch of like counter logic or things like that to make this thing function. But if I needed to, I assume that I've got escape hatches where I can modify this a little bit and change things out just a tad and start making it my own. But the important thing is I don't have to.
Exactly. You don't have to.
Now, I love this. I think this is great. So, all right. So I want to give this a try, and I know React better than most. So that's probably the right place for me to start. Would it make sense for me to like get a code pen to start, or is there an easier way?
Yeah, we could either set up a code sandbox or maybe like use local VS Code with Vite. That works
Yeah,
as
all
well.
right. Let's do local VS Code and Vite. So I will make a new directory, and we're gonna call this Zag State Machine Components. And then I'll get into this. And we're going to, did you want me to just run like a init vite?
I think the command is yarn create vite or something. We have to check.
It is.
Yes, yarn create vite. npm create vite.
Oops. Oh, wait. I want to do it in this directory, though. Yes. Package name is going to be copy pasted, is what it's going to be. And then we'll go with React because that's the one I know best. Do you have a preference on TypeScript or non-TypeScript?
Yeah, I'm a TypeScript junkie, so maybe TypeScript.
TypeScript it
Yep.
is. Let's see here. Just make sure I did it right. I did. I'm going to run npm install. And then we'll open this thing up. So this is our default site. We haven't installed Zag yet. We just have the base of a Vite project. So it's React, it's TypeScript, and it's Vite.
Awesome.
And that opened a bunch of extra stuff I didn't need. So yeah, React, TypeScript, Vite. That's all we've got right now. We've got the ability to run and develop it locally, but I want to include Zag. So what is my first step here?
Awesome. So there are two key things you need to install, depending on the components you want. So if we head back to the Zag docs, if we can switch back and maybe just go all the way up, and then click Get Started.
Okay.
And let's scroll down to any of the components, right? So it's on the left sidebar we have, let's pick the number input component here. We saw that one
Okay.
just now. So we scroll down, and then you see the installation guide in here for npm. So let's grab that one, the npm command for Zag and
Okay.
React.
All right, so we are installing the number input explicitly, and then Zag.js core for React.
Exactly. So the Zag.js number input is just the framework agnostic number input logic. And then you have to install React, which is like the React binding for that machine.
Got it. Okay. And that's interesting. So if we look at the number input on like on GitHub or whatever, what we're going to see is a state machine. We're not going to see like
Yeah.
UI logic or components or anything. We're going to see just a definition of state.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love for us to check it out. Let's go to GitHub and see what it looks like before we go on.
Yes, let's do it. I love this. All right, so we're going into packages, and then we're going to
Packages,
find
machines,
machines, and then we're going to look at number input.
number input. Let's go
Okay.
into the source and then open the .machine.ts, number input.machine.ts file. And if you scroll down here, you basically see the state machine configuration or definition of the number input, right? So it has here the context, which is like some shared data that the number input machine uses. And we also provide a way to actually like modify this like shared context if you need to. We're going to get into that. So the number input is basically something that increments. So you should be able to set the minimum and maximum value, the step size, and things like that. So I'll show you how to do that
Okay.
shortly. Then we have computed values, being able to actually compute things based off of the existing context information that we have, right? So this is more very close to like the view computed and even SolidJS as well. And then we have watch down here, which basically helps us, respond to changes in values, just like the classic use effect, but like just built in within the machine itself. And then it goes on and on to show like the different states, the transitions, the different transitions between the states, events you can send, the actions, and so on. So basically, it's everything running within the number input component, right? And
Yeah.
this is what I mean. Whereas like if you find any issue or any bug, it's super easy to sort of like track down to what state, what event, and then just fix that transition instead, or fix a guard or it might even be like a JavaScript logic. But what you see here feels less overwhelming than if you had to write this in classic React, and it starts to feel like, I mean, you have like too many use refs, use states, and it's really hard to track. Even if you put this into some sort of reducer hook, there's still a bit of React that might bite you in the ass if you had to do this. And we currently do this within Chakra UI, but then that's the reason why we created Zag, to make it a whole lot easier to manage.
Right. And you can see like this is, I would not have expected all of the things that we need to be able to do. And, we're seeing a bunch of guards in here and things that we need to make sure are true. So a lot of stuff to check. And you can see, the guards here are tied to actions, and there's just a lot that happens. And when you're looking at something, like this, and you're like, oh yeah, it's like I would implement that in React with 3 lines of code and then be really surprised when it broke. Right? Because I'm like, well, how can this possibly break? It just goes up and down. This is easy. And then you immediately find ways that it could break, get into weird states. Somebody's going to find a way to mess with it. And having a state machine allows us to solve that problem, meaningfully and in what I would say is a more predictable way. Because I've seen the code that I write when I start to just patch and patch and patch when every time I find an error. And it's not good code. Like
Yeah,
nobody wants to read that. Okay, so we've peeked under the hood, and we've got ourselves a basic React site with Vite and TypeScript, and we've installed Zag's number input. So if I want to get rolling, I'm gonna hop into this
yeah,
app.tsx and let's see, just empty it out, and then let's get weird in here. Let's make something.
sure. So let's head over to the number input docs and just grab like the basic example in there, so we can actually see something working pretty well.
Okay, I'm just gonna make sure I didn't break the site when I just ran this. Here's our basic site. All right, so we've got a Vite site running, and it is making this render. Okay, so now I'm going back to the docs, and we've got installation. All right, usage. This seems like what I want. So I'm going to
Yeah.
start by importing everything as number input. I can do that.
And then if you scroll down, you see that like you see like a full snippet. You can basically just like copy and just like paste that into the project. And I'll
Okay.
take my time to sort of explain what each bit does in there.
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab the pieces that we need. So when we use machine, we're
Yes.
getting number input dot machine, and that is what we found
In here.
here. Okay.
Yes. So basically that describes like the entire logic of the number input, right? So calling the use machine hook gives you access to the state of the machine and a function to send events to the machine, right? So this is one layer. So what we tend to do next here after this is for people to effectively use this machine, you basically maybe need to have an idea of the transitions going on and the states within the machine. And it gets really tedious. It's like, how do I help the consumers of Zag know about the different states, the transitions? Do they have to read through the machine code to see like what they can actually do with the machine? So to solve this problem, that's why we created this extra layer in line 7 called connect. Right. So what connect basically says is, give me the state and give me the sand. I'm gonna cook everything for you. I'm basically gonna cook your meal for you and
Mm.
just like give you everything that you need to build the UI pieces that you need. So inside this connect, we basically like abstract or sort of like consume all the stuff coming from the machine and
Mm-hmm.
just give you a pretty nice API that you can work with. And what's within this API are two key things. One of them are sort of like props that you can basically spread onto the components. and the second one as state properties. So like things like it's disabled, it's dragging, things that you classically have to maybe set up a use state for in React. Like everything is basically in there, setting the value, clearing the value. So you think of this more like the quote unquote like the HTML API for a number import. So that's
Yeah.
exactly what we provide here.
And this is great because, and TypeScript, right? So we can see what's available, and I can increment or decrement. We can focus, and then we have the props you described. We can check things. Is it focused? Is it invalid? And that would let us do other things. We can maximize, minimize, set it to an arbitrary value. We can get the value. I mean, this is and then value is number. That's handy for saving
Mhm.
yourself from like accidentally falsy comparisons of like if 0 equals false kind of thing, like those
Yeah,
those types of
exactly.
problems that'll always get us.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is great. Okay, so I have my ref and my API, and so that means that the next thing I want to do is set up,
Yeah.
right? So this
Yeah.
gets us
So
started.
yeah,
I
this
guess I
gets us
need to do
started.
a
So the next
grant.
thing, the next thing we want to do here is to basically like take a look at what I call the anatomy of the component. So it's like to get a number input to work correctly, what parts do you need
Mm-hmm.
effectively? So a number input, I mean, typically includes like this: the input itself, a label, I mean, at the top for form fields, in case you need to use that within a form. It needs to have an accessible label, some button to increment or decrement the value. So this is typically like, I mean, the triggers to sort of change the value. And I
Mm-hmm.
think even the classic like input type equals range or input type equals number, I mean, provides by default, but this is not customizable. Right. So what we've done here is to help you see the anatomy of that component, so you can actually build according to that anatomy. And this is very crucial to actually like understand or use this arc system. Right. So we know that we're gonna have a label up there somewhere, and we're gonna have the input.
Now we're gonna have a div, and that's gonna have an input, and then we need
Yeah,
buttons to
and then you're
increment and
gonna have two
decrement.
buttons.
Okay, so we've got a
Yes.
button to decrement and a button to increment. And now we got to make these
Yeah.
buttons and labels and everything do stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And one of the things I have to mention here is that this is not tied to any specific like HTML markup. So you don't even have to like wrap them all like line 14 within a div. Like based on your UI requirements, you can sort of like move these
okay.
components around. So that is not exactly tied to like that UI. It's just for the purpose of that example on the demo page on the website that we have this structure here. So
Mm-hmm.
we could decide to maybe switch up the UI to something that has the increment and decrement button to the left and to the right of the input, and maybe just like work with that kind of UI instead.
Yeah. Okay. So let's play. We'll
Mm.
do something a little bit different from what we had before. So we've got these bits here, and then I need to get some of this API stuff going on. So I'm going to, with my decrement, spread out the API dot decrement button props. Just going to rely on TypeScript to save me here. And then I'm going to spread out the increment button props. All right. And then do I get input? Nope. Oh, wait. It expanded something for me. API dot
Input
input
props.
props. There they are. All right. And then I've got my label. So let's go with label props. Oh, it's good. It's good. And so we'll say this is going to be a check here. What don't you like? Form elements must have labels. Okay, so we're going to.
Yeah, I think we can actually like just like disable that because Zag ensures that the label actually works correctly.
Oh,
But I
okay. So
think this
I
is
don't
more
need to
like
set
from
my.
ESLint. Yeah, yeah, you don't need to set the ID up there at least.
Got it. How do I
Cool.
get you
So maybe
to.
we can just like disable this or figure out how to just get ESLint to or
Yeah,
just like
what's the
web
actual.
hint.
Is it just web hint? What if we just do one of these? right? Nope, that's not right. Man, I'm really bad at TypeScript.
Yeah. Yeah, is this like a VS Code extension or something? I'm not sure what the issue is here.
It'll be fine. We'll just
Um,
ignore it.
yeah,
Okay, so it's yelling at me, but it's yelling at me for things that are unrelated to what we're doing, and that's... Oh, we need root props. Okay, so root props, and then we're off to the races. API
yep, exactly.
root. Okay, so if I save this, I'm pretty sure we're still running. We are. So I'm going to come back out to our homepage here, and we've got already a functioning thing. So,
Exactly. So literally without doing like any work, it's just like in there, and it's
mm-hmm.
ready for you to actually like style this to suit like your UI effectively. So if you had some sort of design system or styling solution, you can just go in here and just like style them. But I think one thing I want to focus on before we start writing CSS, if you go back to the browser and just inspect the element, there's something I would like to maybe like showcase before we start styling. So based on the anatomy I described early on, every component has this attribute called data-path, which is a way to identify that element within the DOM. So based on the anatomy I described earlier, you see that there's the label has a part called label. The buttons are called spin buttons because that's literally like what the docs basically call them and what they are called
Mm-hmm.
within the browser. The input is called the input. So you literally don't, sometimes if you're writing CSS, you can just go directly and just use the name of the part. So this is heavily inspired by like web components and the path selector on web components. So basically, we're just calling it data-path, giving that a name, and then you can go in there in your CSS and just like use that as the handle to style these components.
Oh, slick. Okay, so if I come in here, then instead of having to like add class names out here, what I can do instead is I can do data part label, and then I can do something like display block. And now I need to import this again so that we are actually using it. And then if I come back out here, all right, so that's working. Let's go side by side here and do the fast version of CSS. All right, chat, I know I've said this before, but this time I'm serious. I'm really going to be fast on this. So we've got like a data part spin button, right? And then in here we can do something like, background black and color white. Yeah, I mean, this is, yeah, like I love this because it just lets us do like good color, like good useful things. Go to box, and we can do kind of one of these and one of those, and then we'll do like a data part input, and then we'll say like, oh, margin. Unbelievably, like this is slick too, because then I kind of understand what's going on as well, because what I'd probably do in here is set up something like a component number picker, right? And then you kind of have
Mhm.
your number picker component. Maybe that's a separate CSS file, maybe it's organized inside of your code. That sort of work, I think, makes it really straightforward and kind of nice for us
Exactly.
to understand what's going on without having to do a bunch of customization. So yeah, I love that I didn't have to get in here and do a bunch of like class names and stuff like that. That would have been a huge pain. And this is nice and portable. I like that.
Awesome. Yeah, so like I mean, now that we've styled these like elements, let's see how can we customize the machine. I mean, to maybe like fit different criteria. So let's say you wanted to maybe like set up a minimum and maximum value for this machine. So what you can do is if you head back into yeah, let's just wait for this one.
Sorry. Leave me
Yeah,
alone,
it's
chat.
okay.
I didn't mean it. I just need to do this one thing. There. Okay. That was going to bother me otherwise. All right.
Awesome. So
So
let's
now I'm
yeah
back
let's
in
let's
here.
head back to the app. Yeah, cool. So let's head back to the line set. I mean, in line 7 here, you see like number input dot machine. So let's
Hmm.
assume I wanted to customize this machine to have a minimum and maximum value custom. So basically, what you do is instead of just typing that machine, you call the machine as a function and just like pass the object in there that includes min and max. So let's just set the min to maybe I mean whatever values you want, but there's a whole lot of options in there that you can actually like use to customize the behavior of this machine.
Let's go with something that we can get to quickly. And then if I were to come down here, I'm just hitting Control Space to see the available options, and TypeScript gives me all this. So we can see I'm able to like use the mouse wheel. We can do overflow. We can clamp value on blur, which I assume means if I were to like put a max of 25 and then I type in 100 and then I unfocus, it would go back down to 25.
Exactly, exactly.
We can disable it. We can do input change or focus change. We can all sorts of cool things in here. All right, great. So, oh, and we've got handlers. On change, I can fire extra logic. On invalid, I can fire extra logic. Like I could do something like
Exactly.
let's do the easy thing and just say like busted. All right, so I have a very basic set of logic improvements here, and I'm going to refresh the page, and I'm going to go to. So we started at 5. Good. I'm going to try to go over.
I think you can also like press and hold down the mouse instead of like clicking one time.
Oh, you
Because that's
definitely
also like
can.
another feature in there. Yeah, exactly.
See, and now it's busted because I did something invalid. Oh, I tried to change it, right? I tried to delete the value. Can't do that. It's busted. So that, I love this. This is great. So, okay, let's go with, you know, 5 is fine. 50, though, can't type 50. This is good. Oh, and it clamped back down to 25 because I went over the max. This is cool. This is really good.
Yeah, exactly. So this just gives you an idea of like how you can customize the machine, build a much more robust component on top of this machine. So I can easily imagine a scenario where like you can just wrap this main marks into props and you can just like pass those props down to the machine and that just works easily if you wanted to build a component library
Mm-hmm.
out of this, right? So I mean, another thing you can do here could be let's just set like a like let's change the step size. So instead of like having it increment by 1, let's just do like a much higher step size, and then we can see what happens and how the machine handles that.
Do a step of 10. Yeah, like that's great. And then if we want to set like the initial value, start it at the min. No, it doesn't like that. Number is not assignable to string because it's an input, so it needs a string. Is that right? Oh, it's starting
Yeah,
with
it
a
needs
string.
a DOM string exactly.
Yeah, there we go. So now when I refresh, it starts at the minimum instead of leaving me an empty thing. And what I love about this, y'all might have noticed, I didn't have to ask about that. I was able to ask the code. So I could just go in here and start messing around with what my autocomplete says to get to something that
Exactly.
makes sense to me. So that is really,
Awesome.
really
So I
nice.
mean, I think yeah, so one other thing we can do, if you notice that when you reach the main or the max, you cannot like click the button anymore, and we append extra data attributes to this component. So when you reach the max or the main, we actually, I mean, so right now if you inspect the DOM and you check the increment button because we're already like at the max, you see there's a disabled or data disabled property attached to that element. So you can go into your CSS with this data disabled attribute and just like add styles to that to maybe like change the
Oh,
opacity or
okay.
change the background color, and it just automatically gets applied in there.
So now I can do something like data spin button, and we'll just take all of this and how do you do? both at once. There's a way to
You
do
add
this.
another square brackets. Just you just add
Just like
another
that.
square bracket into data. Yeah, data disabled. Yes, exactly.
Oh, nice. I don't know if I've ever done this selector before. And so I'd be able to do a background of, let's say, or no, we'll just change the opacity. That's an easier.
Yeah,
Okay. So when it's disabled, it'll go semi-opaque. Right now I know I can't click it. Right?
exactly.
Slick. Really nice. How much noise are we getting from my neighbor with the weed whacker right now? Okay, so we've got the ability here to really, like, astonishingly quickly build a number input that has all the states that we want. I'm not gonna lie, it always feels great when something works this smoothly. Like we have very little logic in place. You know, I've written like 4 CSS selectors and a grand total of 30 lines of code, and we are at a like a really nice working number picker. So that's, you know, just really, really, really nice. Cool. So what should we try next?
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. We could try different things. Let's say we want to maybe like send events. So if you actually wanted to build this up into a component,
Mm-hmm.
let's see how we can do that. So maybe we just like encapsulate this into a number input
Yes.
component, pass some props to that, and then just like send it down to the machine.
All right. So I'm going to copy these props, and then we're going to take all of this, copy paste, and then what I'm going to do is take this and we'll get rid of all of these bits, and instead drop our number picker here, and I've got a min of, let's go with 1, and a max of 100, and then I'm going to take out my main and this bit.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we have a component, and just to make sure that's working. Okay, so this is our encapsulated component here, and if I move this around, we'll kind of see it all moving, right? So, and now if I go to do it there, now it's at an increment of 1, and the max is 100. Okay, so it's respecting our props. Now we can do some stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, so let's assume, let's take out the value, or let's just like change this to, let's accept a prop in line 6 called like default value or initial value. So it actually communicates the intent of that prop in there.
Okay.
And then let's just pass on an onchange handler. So this callback will basically will just send it straight into the machine, and when the value changes, we get notified with this callback.
Okay. So we've got an on change and we've got an initial value. I will set an initial value. We'll just leave that, I guess.
Yeah, we can set a default or just leave it. It's fine.
Should I do something like this to make sure that it
Yeah,
works
that's
in the...
okay. That's okay. Yeah, awesome.
Okay. All right. So then in here, I'm going to do an initial value of, we'll say 10. And then we wanted an on change, and that on change is going to be, for now, I guess we can just console log something and say,
Yeah,
what up, chat? Okay, so then if I open this up, and we'll go over to the console, then anytime I make a change, we get what up, chat. All right. And this is like pretty understandable stuff. Like I don't feel like I'm stretching my brain to understand how this all works and fits together, which is always a good feeling when I'm working with something brand new. It's
exactly.
you know, I'm building a component library. If you had told me today that I was going to build a component library, I wouldn't have thought that I would be this far in what, 40 minutes. Like it's very this is the kind of thing that makes me feel really empowered as a developer, is when I don't have to spend a day and a half setting up the boilerplate or the foundation code to build the thing that I'm supposed to build. I want to get right into building the thing that's valuable, which in this case is a piece of UI that looks the way that I want it to and I know isn't going to break. I didn't have to build the logic. I didn't have to build all of the underpinnings. I just had to make this look the way that I want. And now I've got a like a droppable component that is configurable on the pieces that I want it to be configurable on. And the rest I can control internally. Like this step size, I can control that and say, you don't get to change my step size. It's always 10. Or I could make that a component, but now I have control without having to write that logic myself. I just get to boop, there it is. So this is great. I like this.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's see two things. So if you go back to the unchanged in line 32 or something, let's scroll down a little bit. So in the unchanged, every event handler in ZAR gives you like the details of that event that happens. So you can grab the details from that unchanged callback in there, and just let's just log it out to see what comes out of that when it changes.
Okay. So I've got my details. Let me refresh the page here. All right. So the details that we got are a value of what the new value is, and the value is number of 20.
Exactly. So you can go with this and then like use it to sort of like maybe like wire up your UI or sort of like send this to some API or like it just works automatically even with like form data. For example, if you wanted this to work within a form, all you have to do is just add like a name attribute to the machine, and there you
Mm-hmm.
go. You can now submit that within the form.
Yeah. So check this out. I'm gonna do a little bit of a thing here. So if I take my current boop count, right now I'm using React state. I'm gonna pass the React state in here, and then I can set boop count to details value as number, right?
Yeah.
Implicitly has
Yeah,
anything.
we're using TypeScript, so that yeah, yeah, because we do not define the type.
Let's see if it actually fails though. It sure doesn't. Lets me do whatever I want. But now look, I have this, and if I want to use this somewhere else, let's go with current boop count. It just works. And all I had to
Exactly.
write was the important logic, the stuff I cared about, not the things that like just make a component function and make sure that we don't break it. But like what I care about in this app is that when somebody sets that number to 10, it shows 10 elsewhere in the UI, right? Did that make sense? Got it? Great. Like yeah, this is really, really, really nice.
Awesome. Yeah, and then for the TypeScript like conscious folks, what we can do, let's see if we can maybe like tighten up the types a bit more. So if we scroll up all the way to line 7, we can sort of type that props in there, or maybe let's create a type. Let's create a type called number picker props, and actually like define that. Right. So number pickup props here. We know the main is a number, so that goes in there. We know the max is a number, that goes in there. Initial value is also a number, and then unchanged. So I mean, how do we get the unchanged? So every machine, so you can do like number input dot context, which is number input as in line 1, number input dot context. And then you can grab the unchanged from that context, basically. So you do square brackets, and then you grab like unchanged as a string in there. Yeah,
Like
so that
that?
way you sort of like get the type. Yeah, exactly. From the context.
Oh.
Then. And now if we pass it on to the component, I don't think we passed it to the component just yet. ESA in line 14. So let's just append the type to that component.
Number picker props.
I think it's to the left of the braces. Just after the structuring, you put the column
Oh,
in there.
right,
Yes,
right, right.
yes,
That's
exactly.
not.
Yeah,
Okay, there we go. Okay, so now that's where it needs to be. And if we go to these details, it actually shows us the value, and the value is number, which is wonderful because I actually had to type that out. But now if I go in and type a dot, I get the thing that I want. I can just, press enter all the way to victory.
exactly. Awesome. All right, so the last thing I can show you here basically is like more stuff you can do with the API.
Mm-hmm.
So if we come in here to the number input component, let's assume we have let's try to create like a clear button basically within the same number picker. So if you wanted to maybe show a clear button in number picker, let's
Okay.
just add one more button there that says clear.
Okay, so if I add that
And in
button,
here,
it works. But I
yep. So
want.
let's see how can we make this component work. So let's go. We don't have like an API.clear button because that's not part of like the nomenclature of the number input.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have a function we can call if we wanted to like clear the value. So let's do like an onClick here, and within the callback in there, we can just like call like API.clear value. I think.
Okay, so on click, we're going to do API clear value. And then to make this work, I could do data part
Clear
clear
button or
button.
something.
So
Exactly.
now, right, I've kind of followed the convention that's coming out of Zag. So when I come into my CSS, I can do one of these and say, let's go with border none and background none. And we'll do like a margin left of, right. And whatever, this is not like, we'd probably have to talk about how this all works to make sure it's making sense for people, but oh yeah, we haven't we have our on invalid that doesn't work. So we would have to
Yeah, we can
fix.
get rid of that one.
Let's get rid of that. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's gone, and now I increment clear. Oh wait, I gotta reload. You would like 0 boops. Oh, it comes down to 0. That's nice. I love it. I think this is great. And
Exactly. So this is the true power of the API. It gives you like some key functions that you can use to sort of like modify like the logic of the number input. There's even more stuff going on in the API. If you just like explore that and like see all the functions exposed to you, I think there are functions like set value to min, set value to max, and so on. So you can actually use these functions to actually enhance the experience of the number input. Awesome.
yeah. Just
So I
some
mean, so just to make it, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm just kind of just reveling in how nice this is to work with, and how the level of potential that I see in this sort of almost like what's the next layer of abstraction below a component library, right? It's not, this isn't something like Bootstrap or Material UI where what you're getting is like making a UI that looks like this. What you're getting instead is pre-packaged battle tested logic that you can rely on, and you get to make it look like whatever you want. So to me, this is the first time I'm seeing a UI library where I'm kind of excited to use it. And that's no shade against anybody who's building component libraries. I just like to make things look the way that I like, and that usually means I end up fighting with component libraries more than I care to. So I for my personal projects, I'm always like, I'll just design it myself because it's easier for me than like learning a component library styles and then reverse engineering them so that I can override. This though, I don't see myself wanting to override the way that an increment and decrement button works, or like the open and close states for a menu, or things like a select drop down. I don't want to build that. So you typically what I do is I don't build that stuff and I just have like text inputs and lots of instructions that are like, don't do it like this or it'll break. Because I don't want to build that logic, right? So looking at this, I'm actually excited because I can see using this and not feel like I'm giving up control over the way that my app looks, just being confident that it's going to work.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is like the key premise behind Zag. We want to provide you the key pieces you need to build your app, like styling out of the way. It's just like the piece of logic. The key premise here is we don't want you to sweat over the logic and like how this
Mm,
is meant to work, how is it gonna work. And it's like we don't also want to, let you sweat over like how do I like put attach an on click or on mouse down or on pointer down, all those kind of like event handlers. So what we do then is we take the proactive approach to actually like wrap this up into an API that you can just spread onto the components, right? And you don't
hmm.
even have to worry about anything. You show your components accessible. You show this would work fantastically well within a form. So you don't even need like some control states to send data to a form. All you need to do is just add a name. Just pass a name to the machine. The machine knows how to figure it out, and it just works out of the box.
Very, very cool stuff. All right. So, knowing that we've got roughly 15 minutes, is there anything else that you want to show, or is this a good stopping point
Yes.
to let people go and explore?
Yeah, there's something else I'd love to show.
Yeah.
I know someone asked me, is there a way we can visualize the logic, of these machines, just like X state?
Oh.
So we've been trying to sort of like figure out like a way to like do this.
Hmm.
The syntax within Zag is a little bit different from X state, but they're still also pretty close, right? So what we've gone ahead to do, thanks to like Abraham, like one of the awesome dudes that works with me, to actually like improve Zag. So I'm gonna send you a link in the chat now, uh, for what we're working on. Pretty rough work in progress. I probably see a few bugs in there, but this gives us like a link to like all of the machines we currently have in Tag. So if you click the number input, for example, it helps you to see the level of complexity going on in the number
Whoa.
input machine itself. So you can take a look at all of this, see how what's going on internally. If you
Hmm.
don't want to use ARG, you can go ahead to build your own. Just like use this as the guide and the map, to actually like give you some direction. And even when you find bugs within the machine, you can easily like launch this, take a look at the state transition, and just be like, okay, I think there's a bug in here. Maybe we need to fix it. This transition is not right, or this guard is not right, and it makes it easier to find issues and actually fix them. So actually,
Hmm.
what we are trying to do within Zag is anytime anyone opens a PR to fix an issue, we want to be able to see the before and after visualization like this. So if you open a PR, we
Yeah.
want to see like what the logic looks like before, what it looks like after, and be able to make decisions based on that. So I'm not looking at how fancy or how fancy the logic or the JavaScript code looks like. I'm looking at the logic and the state transitions. Do they actually work or do they introduce new bugs?
You know what I love about this is it simplifies things like code review. And I mean, when you start talking about state charts, they simplify code review in a big way anyways, because there's a pretty true or false success state in here. But when you get into visualization, the conversation changes because now, and when David was on the show, we talked about this a lot. When I have something visual like this, I can go to the leadership team, I can go to the designers, I can go to the product team, and I can say, this is what it's going to do. Does that line up with what you said it should do? And you can have a conversation about a chart like this in a way that you can't have a conversation about code. Now, this is still like there's a lot going on here, but we can walk through this. I can follow this through what the app does. We get to, all right, there's the ability to like press down. You can, do all this different interesting stuff in here that lets me actually control that we're going to increment, we're going to decrement, we're going to do different stuff. And based on what somebody has done, we have the ability to like talk through the logic together. That to me turns code into a communication tool in a way that it
Mm,
it always was implicitly, but it's not explicitly unless everybody in the room can code. With visualizations, now it's explicitly a communication medium because the code generates a state chart and you can talk about a state chart.
exactly, exactly. So this is pretty much like the premise, and I think that this is such a game changer here, because now we shift the conversation away from like maybe the use effect dependency is not complete, or you need to add some ESLint rules in here, or you need
Mm-hmm.
to add some if else movement to a top down approach where you think about how the component works first. You model that in a machine, or if you wanted to fix a bug in here, you can easily see what point we can actually detect the point of failure, and we can then like open a PR. We can review what it looks like before and after, and then be like, "Oh, you're actually right. We missed this transition. Let's add that transition into the machine,"
Mm.
and it just works.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and it's pretty easy to see like if you've got a state that's just sitting over here with no lines connected to it, you forgot to implement that, right? That's actually one of my favorite
Exactly.
things about state machines is if you go through and you start thinking about it, you can say, all right, so I'm going to build a login screen, and that needs the like there's the login screen, there's when I've actually started filling it out, and then there's the it's been submitted, it's submitted successfully, it's submitted with an error, the different error states for the inputs. And when you start talking about design, we've all been in that situation where we talk to a designer and we say, yeah, give us a login form, and then we realize halfway through coding it that we're missing a bunch of potential failure states or edge cases. But if we start by
Exactly.
working through a state chart, we get a checklist. Oh yeah, we need a failure state for username, a failure state for email, a failure state for whether or not the form submission worked, a failure state for an incorrect password, not found email. Any of those things is going to be something that you have to handle, and then you can have a conversation about how to handle those, and the designer knows that it's expected, not like, oh yeah, here's an input form, go code that, right? You know what the states are and have a better conversation and a
Exactly.
much more clarity about scope.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's like one of the key selling points of like being able to visualize this logic. So I'd like to show you like the final piece, which is like like a secret feature within like the number input.
Ooh,
So if you
secret
click here, we can
features.
swipe back into we can swipe back into the code. But one second, maybe you can just stay on the screen in the
Okay.
browser. All right. So in here within the state chart, you can see that there's an event called like pointer down scrubber, pointer move scrubber. That gives us a hint to actually like tell us that we can actually like scrub the values of this number input, as opposed to like clicking some increment or decrement button. If I
Okay.
wanted to be the design tool where like I just want people to scrub through the values like really fast, as opposed to like clicking up and down, plus and minus, how can I implement this? So let's then like go into the number input and activate this like hidden feature
All
basically.
right, let's do it.
All right, so what you do is just add an arbitrary element in there in from line 25. Let's just add an arbitrary like div component or element in there, and then give it spread on the scrubber props to that. API to scrubber props. So what you do here is you go into the CSS and let's just create a style like a box basically. So we just put like data part is scrubber, and then we just make it a square box for now.
Okay, so we'll go border 2 pixels, solid red, and we'll go with a width of 25 and a height of 25, and that should give us a box. Here's our box.
Exactly. Yeah. So try
Oh,
and interact with us. Yeah.
really straightforward. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so if you do like a very large max value, you might actually see like one of the benefits. So if you wanted to scrub through, let's say 5 to like 1,000 or 2,000, you see that's a whole lot easier to use a scrubber. It gives you that affordance that you need to actually scrub through the values like really fast. And then
Yeah,
there's a hidden
because
gem
this
in
would
there.
take
That's
me.
like if you
Oh, wait, let me
let's
refresh.
refresh the page, and
So this would
then
take me forever, right? Like
yeah, you
we'd be
could
here for a while.
potentially just mouse down. you can potentially mouse down on that one to
And even
implement
just
it really
holding the
fast.
mouse down,
Or
still going to be a while. Or
yeah, you can go like forward or backwards. And the interesting thing is that the cursor actually wraps, right? So in there you can see that like it actually like keeps going, it keeps scrubbing the value there in there. So like if pointer, I think there's an API, I mean, that actually like locks the pointer. I think maybe using like Microsoft Edge, but
I
if you
am.
use like Chrome, for example, you could probably be able to get that like wrap. I mean that wrapping feature out of the box, or
The
maybe
heck?
Firefox. If you have Firefox, that should work as well.
Did I uninstall all my browsers? I might have uninstalled all my browsers.
Yeah, that's okay. So either ways, I mean, we see that we actually able to
Whoops.
scrub through the values using the pointer. So that's like an extra affordance. So I imagine a scenario where you can wrap the input with this scrubber and just allow people like scrub the values
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like actually like manually having to use incremental decrements. So this is very popular in design tools or like actual like web app tools.
Mm-hmm.
So this pattern is also built into the machine. So this is what we mean that it gives you everything you need if effectively.
It's really, really slick stuff that there's a lot of very good potential here. So let's set this to a slightly less absurd value, and then we'll refresh the page. There we go. Now we can actually scrub. So that was I tried to go absurd to see what would happen, but as usual, moderation is key. So now I can scroll back and forth. I mean, I love this. I think this is great. So we've got our our step sizes. Everything is doing what we expect. Sage, this is wonderful. Like really, really love the way that you've put this together. It's super exciting. And like every episode that we do about state machines, I kind of walk away going, man, I should do more state machines. And I don't know why I don't. Um, but you should, chat. Go write those state machines. Your life is going to get so much easier. So I think this feels like the right time to start asking what resources should we share with the chat if they want to go and learn more about Zag?
Yeah, so I mean, right now the docs is the best place to go. And if you're feeling like, if you're feeling like you want to know what's going on, behind like under the hood, you can go into the repo, check out the machines we have. And quite frankly, like these are just like pure state machine ideas. Like if you look at Zag and you say, oh, I don't want to use Zag in my project, you can install Xstate. Just grab the
Hmm.
machine and just like use that as well. So this serves as a recipe, so in as much as it's a library, it also serves as a recipe, just for you to see how you can build a number of inputs. So even if you never wanted to use like Zag, you can use Xstate, and it's just like works
Oh,
pretty.
nice.
The APIs are like pretty close as well.
Great. There is a question in the chat from Full Stacking. Are there plans for more components?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a few components here that don't exist in the docs. Combo
Mm.
box, rating, as you can see, splitter, a couple of them in there. There's like not out there yet. So maybe just focusing on like documenting them and getting them out. And then we can go into like more solid component like date pickers, like cringe for. I mean, I think when I
Mm.
maintain check value, maintaining check value and building a date picker, a classic React is like, I don't even want to go there because like there's a lot of things, edge cases you have to handle. But now I feel a bit more confident to actually like take
Sure.
on this more complex components and just add it there. It's such like a breath of fresh air to know that once this is solved, it's basically solved for every framework and anyone can use this.
That is really nice. And then Simon FLK is asking, is React Native on the roadmap?
Not in the near term, but it's pretty easy to actually put this logic. I mean, there's just a few pieces of like dumb things in the
Mm.
machine themselves, and I assume that you can easily like write a way to actually make it like platform agnostic as well. Yeah, but
Mm.
then the core focus is to see like how can we deliver as much value to the web platform first, and then we can go into like the native platform. Because I think the APIs in the native platform is a lot like it is a lot less friend. It's a lot more like friendlier and easier to sort of like wrap your head around compared to like dealing with like so many events and like get element by
Mm.
query selector and things you have to do in the web. Let's get through the web, and I mean a few more components in there, and I think we can maybe start thinking about how we can support React Native as well.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have today. So if you have follow-up questions, make sure you go and follow Sage on Twitter. You can find him there. And make sure that you go and check out the sponsors for the show. We've had Ashley here from White Coat Captioning. You can find a link to that on the homepage of the site. Thank you, Ashley, for being here. And that's made possible through support from Netlify, NX, and Backlight, all of whom are kicking in to make this show more accessible to more people. We've got some good stuff coming up this week. So we've had Sage here today, and then we're going to hear from Hriday Gupta about building a custom app dashboard. If you've heard of Retool, we're going to be trying out Retool. I'm pretty excited to see how this works. It's something that, you know, you watch the demo and you go, that feels a little too good to be true. So we're going to give it a try and learn. May is actually a very busy month, so we're going to have fewer Learn with Jason episodes because I'm going to be in person at events for the first time in 2 years. I'll be at RemixConf. I'll be at Render ATL. If you're going to be there, come say hi. I'd love to meet you. I'd love to talk to folks. So make sure. Oh, and I'm going to be at Future Stack in next week. So if you're going to be at New Relic's Future Stack, make sure you come out there as well. All right, y'all. Sage, any parting words for the chat before we send them off into the sunset?
No, I'd say like thank you so much for everyone in here for hanging out with us, learning about Zag. We have like a few like I call it like fun words around Zag. So it's like we say like anyone that uses Zag.js would be called a Zagger, right? And like when you use Zag.js in your project, the feeling we call that feeling Zagadat. So basically like these are less like fun fun things around Zag you find in docs. So just wanted to share that. It's like, I mean, we want to actually live and breathe state machines, and actually like evolve the web to actually be like this, like, I mean, real standard that it truly is, right? So at the end of the day, we want to actually feel like we are engineering a solution as opposed to like plumbing our way through to get it to work, right? So this is like the core premise, and I think doing all of this while making sure experiences is accessible, I think is like the most challenging part of all this. Like, what's the point of making using state machines if you cannot make like the experience accessible to your customers, to your end users? So these are like the key challenges in there. So just keep it out as an open challenge to help to let everyone start to like think about like how can you like get better at building components, building your applications in a way that's like pulled out of the UI. You're just modeling the logic itself, and also like taking careful consideration about accessibility and the experiences and the end user experience for your customers.
Love it. All right, Sage, thank you so much for taking some time to hang out with us today. Chat, as always, thank you for hanging out. Stay tuned. We're going to go find somebody to raid. We will see you all next time.